Good evening, Los Angeles. President Martinez, honorable council members, and fellow Angelenos who are staying safer at home. 46 days ago, our world changed. There were just under 100,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19 on the planet, and just 7 here in Los Angeles County. But here in LA, we took drastic measures immediately, and I know that for some of you it felt early. But as I said at the time, when something feels wrong, sometimes it's the right time to take action, because by the time it feels right, it's too late. And so we moved swiftly, and night after night we asked more of you at every step. But the lessons of history taught us that the cities that acted the slowest during pandemics suffered the most, in the toll paid both in lives and livelihoods. So first we banned gatherings, and then we closed bars and nightclubs, movie theaters, gyms, and concert halls. We asked you to keep your physical distance and issued our safer at-home order. And thanks to Governor Newsom's extraordinary leadership, California acted later that same day. We required you to wear a face covering if you entered or worked at many essential businesses, and within days, cities around the state and the country did the same. We asked you to sacrifice and to help save lives, knowing that it would be a blow to your stability and your income, but knowing that not doing this would be far, far worse. And while we asked most of you to stand still, we counted on others to move fast. Medical personnel, government workers, first responders, grocery clerks, longshore workers, truck drivers, all kept open vital lifelines and transformed our city to boost beds, buy supplies, and to keep our city services functioning. With more people staying home, more trash had to get picked up, so we started offering extra trash collection free of charge. With more cars parked on residential streets, we shifted our street paving to major corridors to complete big projects faster and to keep our neighborhoods more serene. With rising fear came more questions, so 311 operators and our help desk answered even more calls each night. And we kept the lights on and the water flowing. MTA operators kept buses in motion to take nurses to work. Our city workforce has filled roles they never expected. DWP and Department of Transportation staff now deliver meals to the elderly. Sanitation and Rec and Parks employees help run centers that shelter Angelenos who are experiencing homelessness. Our housing and economic development teams connect people and businesses with loans and relief that can make the difference between ruin and recovery. Just as these folks were vital to our city's response, our city has been vital to our nation's response, with our port and airport serving as the entry points for personal protective equipment that comes from overseas on its way to the doctors and the nurses on the front lines in every corner of our nation. In years past, our region has been hamstrung by bureaucratic, territorial, and political barriers, but not this time. Building on the relationships fostered over the last years, we came together. County Board of Supervisors Chair Catherine Barger and her colleagues have been incredible partners. Dr. Barbara Ferrer has become a steadying presence in our homes, like a family doctor for a county of 10 million. I've convened the mayors of LA County's 88 cities on the phone. Several times a week, I have Zoom meetings with the mayors of California's biggest cities. I talk weekly with mayors nationwide and around the world, where we share ideas and best practices. Some leaders in a crisis pass blame, but I'm so proud to be working with leaders who share responsibility. We talk about how to protect our residents and how we can work together to deliver robust and just and a healthy recovery. My friends, it has been the honor of my life to serve this city for 19 years. I've been proud to be a part of the city family every single day I come to work here. The days are long, the years pile up, the gray hair is more generous, but whenever I'm tired, I think about my fellow city family. Because for 2 decades, I've witnessed firsthand acts of courage from your public servants. I've seen firefighters on the line in the heat and the smoke, protecting our homes and our people. I've cried with the families of police and traffic officers after they've given their lives to us. I've seen workers volunteer on their weekends to clean up an alleyway with community groups on their own time and their own dime. When I said that this government would not shut down, I was confident because I know the people who make up your city government, and I knew they would make good on that promise. All of us remember the 2008 recession. Until now, it was the biggest economic blow of our lifetime, and it hurt. But there's no way to sugarcoat this. This is bigger, and it will hurt more. Our city revenues have plummeted. Hotel reservations have collapsed. After 9/11, our airport closed for 2.5 days, and passenger traffic fell by as much as a third that month, and it took us 10 years to claw our way back. Today, airport passenger traffic is down 95%. From a fiscal perspective, this is the worst it's ever been. We've borrowed $70 million to date from our special funds and our reserve fund to front the costs related to our COVID-19 response. Some of that will be reimbursed by state and federal governments, but some may not. But under no circumstance was I going to save pennies and lose lives. Rolling out testing for Angelenos at highest risk, expanding it to cover everyone with symptoms. These were expenses we couldn't shy away from, and they won't be the last ones either. And I'm so grateful that together with this City Council, we had the foresight to build up our reserve fund year after year after year. Combined with a budget stabilization fund, we headed into the pandemic with reserves equivalent to double what we had before the Great Recession, and the highest on record. Now, I know you don't get awards for saving money and cutting costs and boosting bond ratings, but I believe our prudence has paid off. Tomorrow, the city charter requires, and I will release my projected budget for the fiscal year that begins July 1st. I always say that budgets are a statement of our values, but this year, it is also a document of our pain. Soon, many departments will have to operate at sharply reduced strength. Cherished programs will lose funding, while recreational and community services will see significant changes. We'll have to spend less on removing graffiti, caring for our urban forest, and we face sharp limits right now. But I have drawn a red line around the foundation of our common good, those back-to-basic investments that keep our neighborhoods safe, our streets clean, our families housed, and our children and seniors fed. We've already enacted a hiring freeze in our city government, and that will continue in the coming year. Unfortunately, we must also face another painful reality, that our civilian employees will take 26 furlough days over the course of the next fiscal year, the equivalent of a 10% reduction in pay. I do not take that step lightly. I know every day we're down even one person is a loss to our city. And it's my priority to reduce the number of furlough days as soon as possible. So I've called on the federal government to either loosen restrictions on emergency funds that prevent us from using them to replace lost revenue, or in the next CARES package, help bail out America's cities, just as you've bailed out the banks. The bottom line, though, is just like households are doing, we will have to scale back the scope of our spending. But even as we scale back, we will never lose sight of our core commitments to protect your health, to jumpstart your recovery, to deliver your fundamental services as we keep pursuing our long-term missions to end homelessness, save our planet, and eradicate poverty. Hard times like these raise some big questions, and there are 4 that we need to ask ourselves right now. First is the most urgent, and I know it's on your mind. How? How will we make it through? It may be months, my friends, before we safely gather in large groups. It may be a year or more before a vaccine or medicine frees us from periodically returning to safer at home. But I am so proud of what we have done as a city to staunch the bleeding. Emergency protections like our eviction moratoriums and our rent freeze are helping. Our manufacturers have retooled their assembly lines to produce face coverings and essential equipment, and to keep people at work. Our labs and universities have lent their expertise on testing, tracing, and economic revitalization. And our philanthropic community has stood up to ensure nobody gets left behind. With donations large and small, the Mayor's Fund for Los Angeles has put food on the table and grocery cards in people's hands, provided childcare for our healthcare workers, meals for our seniors, and beds and safe havens for victims of domestic violence. And my wife, Amy Lane Wakeland, your First Lady, has been a driving force behind our launch of the Angelino Card initiative of the Mayor's Fund, which offers funded debit cards to our low-income neighbors and doesn't discriminate based on immigration status. You see, the resilience and resolve of this city is on display every single day in our embrace of physical distancing, in mutual aid networks and neighborhood support groups. But right now, we're only in the first battle of this fight. Without a vaccine, we will almost certainly see a second wave of this novel coronavirus. But let me be clear, we cannot stay indoors for 6 or 7 months without risking an even greater economic catastrophe. Which brings me to the second question. When can we begin to leave our homes? Now, I believe the choice set up early between saving lives and saving our economy was a false one. The only way to save our economy is by saving lives. And the only way we can save lives is by clearing a path to safely reopen our economy. So how do we get there? Just as we didn't wait for cases to ramp up to take action, we don't wait for cases to ramp down to start planning. Last week, I laid out Los Angeles' key elements for our return. 1, testing both for the virus and for its antibodies. 2, real-time dynamic monitoring to see where cases are, followed by 3, an immediate tracking and tracing response to quarantine people so that the virus can't spread to others. 4, building and maintaining our hospital capacity, both the human talent of nurses, techs, and doctors, and the equipment and supplies so that they can safely treat the worst cases, even if we have a second spike. And finally, 5, we need ongoing research and development into treatments and a vaccine for this disease, and I'm proud of hospitals here in LA that are leading the way. To lead this effort and to rebuild our economy, I have proposed the formation of a CARES Corps, a coalition of local governments and health agencies, medical professionals and businesses backed by federal funding and built to combat COVID-19 and to accelerate our return to an economy that is strong. In the short term, these CARE Corps would help contact tracing efforts, deliver food to vulnerable populations, support our testing sites, build and staff shelters, and assist small businesses. And then in the long term, they will address systemic disparities in access to medical services, incentivize careers in high-need fields, train Corps members in disaster response, and cross-train individuals from the public, nonprofit, corporate, and independent sectors to support essential services during emergencies. And it would take advantage of the skills of public workers and put to work unemployed Angelinos who need a paycheck. And we will get this done by putting the power in the hands of any Angelino willing to step forward. Now, the CARES Corps is only one facet of our comeback. And we're also going to have to accept lasting changes and new realities in our daily lives, new rules of the road for our workplaces, our schools, our train stations and airports and malls. And I want to be clear, it won't all happen at once. Going back out won't be like flipping a light switch in a single moment. Think about it as a circuit breaker box. To stay safe, some switches stay off while you turn on the lights one room at a time. It won't be everything at once, but it will be so much better than this darkness. My third question is about that darkness. When we do go back, what damage will have been done? At the height of the Great Recession, our city's unemployment rate hit 13.4%. Today, it's already higher. Preliminary numbers for the top of this month show nearly 300,000 Angelinos unemployed, and that number will continue to rise. Behind those numbers are neighbors, behind those statistics, stories, and it hasn't fallen upon all of us equally. Fewer Latinos, Asian Americans, and African Americans have the option of working from home statistically. Many working class Angelenos of color who could keep working have had to risk their health by doing so on front line as those frontline workers. So we were among the first cities to protect vulnerable workers by requiring face coverings and hand sanitizer at essential businesses. So far, 600 of our neighbors have died from COVID-19 across our county. Nearly 3,400 have been hospitalized. There's good reason to believe that your actions have absolutely helped us flatten this curve. But to be clear, the numbers still are going up. Yesterday, we lost 81 Angelenos. Until our numbers start to shrink, we still have a lot of work to do. And each one of those dots on a graph represents one human life cut short. And that one life is in turn connected to families, communities, workplaces, and neighborhoods. Here in LA, we are all inextricably linked to every single loss each day. And in the grip of this disease, that means a final embrace denied for the sake of the health of loved ones and medical personnel. This cruel virus steals even the hour to gather and mourn and salute their memories. We are in the midst of a collective trauma that will leave none of us unmarked, and so many of us deeply wounded. And my heart goes out to every family mourning tonight. But if there's any justice to be had, it will be in how we heal, which brings me to the final question. When we do return, who do we want to be, Los Angeles? You see, outside of our homes, there is a great city waiting for us. The things that we love about LA will persist. Our weather, our music, our food and culture, our drive to transform and innovate, our freedom, and what we believe in, the idea that we all belong to a block, to a neighborhood, to this entire place, and yes, to one another. We live, in the words of my friend Antonio Hernandez, in a city that is an imperfect paradise. While our weather and our people are unmatched, we, like everyone, struggle with challenges. We grapple with homelessness, with children growing up unequally, with traffic and pollution, with decades of neglect that have piled up. And while we set the pace for the nation in so many ways, in innovation, in freedom, in belonging, we must ask of our city and our nation at this time, is normal really what we want to come back to? Because before this crisis, on a normal day in the United States, we saw a federal minimum wage stand still for years while executive compensation knew no limit. We heard the slogan of America First elevated above actually putting all Americans first without pushing our immigrant neighbors into the shadows. We knew some families who could easily pay the full cost of college while too many of us drown in debt. And we had some friends who had better health insurance and better health, while others' bodies paid the toll of the discrimination in our society and the disparities in our medical system. Long before this crisis, too many Americans had been forgotten by a country that speaks about the many, but too often favors the few. But just as I believe that Los Angeles was uncommonly prepared for the unforeseeable, I believe that Los Angeles will inspire the groundwork for a future that is much better than normal ever was. To have 36,000 people without a place to call home, that was a public health crisis well before COVID-19 came along. I called for a FEMA-level response to our homelessness crisis almost 2 years ago, and it took this virus to finally get the federal funding to begin to make it happen. But as a city, we haven't been waiting, not waiting to take action. We've been digging deep, passing record investments like Prop HHH and Measure H to deliver housing, healing, and hope to the unsheltered. But in this crisis, we have a new county-wide plan to find thousands of hotel and motel rooms to prevent the spread of the virus among people who are experiencing homelessness. And once those fellow Angelenos come inside, they must not return to the streets. We passed a moratorium on evictions, but let us guarantee that the loss of a job need not mean the loss of your home. Let's back with federal funds a suspension of rent and mortgages during this crisis. And let's use a massive expansion of Section 8 to create the affordable and social housing that will end our housing crisis once and for all. Here in this city, we made our college promise, the largest now in the country, our commitment to making community college free for every LAUSD graduate. So let's build on that nationwide with a promise to make college free for everyone who wants it. Give millions more the opportunity to pursue education as part of our recovery, to attend four-year universities as well as trade schools and community colleges as a way to get ahead, just as the GI Bill did after World War II and democratized education and wealth. You see, the soul of our recovery will shape the contours of our city's future for decades to come. And while we've been addressing our biggest problems head-on, homelessness, traffic, but let's not try to recapture just the past when we have a blueprint of a city of the future. A few footsteps away from these chambers, 7 years ago, I stood on the steps of City Hall and made a promise to get this city back to the basics. And now, we filled enough potholes to fill the Coliseum. We paved enough streets to stretch half the length of the equator. We didn't do it to stand still. We made ourselves a runway to our destiny, strengthening city services, common sense reforms, and a culture of problem solving. These were the keys to building up our economy. And that same solid foundation will help us build it again. After the last recession, we recovered faster than the state, and the state faster than the nation. Los Angeles was a sprinter, and that solid foundation and that same speed can help us do it again. We're not just Angelenos. We are the caretakers of the third largest metropolitan economy on this planet. We don't just live in LA, we work in the nation's busiest port and live in some of the safest neighborhoods in history. And as we look ahead, we carry no small plans. So here's the deal I'm going to put on the table. To our friends in Washington, D.C., do what it takes to keep us building. Pass a national infrastructure bill now so we can put people back to work and we'll show the country how to get it done. Because here in LA, we've already begun this work. We passed Measure M, a sales tax measure that funds our transit vision, the nation's biggest in history ×2. A vision of connected communities, 21st century infrastructure, and an LA economy that's green, resilient, and built to last. When we passed Measure M, I said it would produce 787,000 middle-class, recession-proof jobs. And I said we would make sure those jobs found their way to communities who have too often been denied a fair share of our common prosperity. Now it is time to accelerate those jobs. But with transit agencies nationwide bleeding right now, we need federal support to keep America moving. When I released LA's historic Green New Deal, I thought I would see my grandchildren before I would see a sky as blue and as pure as the one that's outside our windows today. We won that sky by saving each other from a disease. But if we can keep that sky blue, we can save many more lives from asthma and cancer and from climate catastrophe. Do we dare do any less? We'll need bold steps to protect our planet and to build a green economy that works for everyone. So let's take those steps, because LA leadership gets results. We've led the way by staying home and by raising the wage. We've led the way by wearing face coverings and by protecting the undocumented. Those Angeleno cards were followed by California's $125 million fund to support immigrant families. Let's follow that by opening every part of our recovery to every immigrant, no matter their status. You see, when Los Angeles takes action, we inspire the nation and we inspire the world. And God knows we could all use a little inspiration right now. The shock to our economy and our lives recalls the scale of the challenges faced by the generation who sacrificed through the Great Depression and World War II, and who turned their eyes to President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And what he offered throughout was reassurance and resolve, healing and hope. And in his second to last State of the Union address, he said that true individual freedom cannot exist without economic security and independence. He told us that on top of the liberties of speech and worship, we must guarantee jobs, homes, medical care, education, and protection in old age and infirmity. Roosevelt didn't try to get America back to normal. He painted a picture of new and better days, calling upon us to imagine not only what we could have, but what we could and must stand for. We owe each other no less on this very day. The forces that fought the New Deal tooth and nail would be astonished to see how much more wealthy our nation is today, and how much more concentrated that wealth is once again. This nation has the resources to fund a real recovery, and it must, so that we can hire and train the teachers, the homeless outreach workers, the contact tracers and lab technicians of the CARES Corps. Because the stark budget choices in front of us must not be the final word. Don't bail out banks, but leave cities with cuts and collapse. If you want to reopen America, America's cities are where this nation begins. And a weakened city anywhere brings the pain of laid-off workers, of fewer services, and sends ripples through every main street and every home. But in resilient and strengthened cities, businesses will find their footing once again. The jobless will find their work and their worth, and communities will protect their loved ones' health. Our strong city, this Los Angeles, is willing to lead the recovery, just as we moved fast when this pandemic arrived on our shores. We, like cities across this country, must not be abandoned now. So tonight, I stand before you because our city's charter directs the mayor to publicly address the council on the state of the city. I've never before hesitated to assure you that our city is strong. But I won't say those words tonight. Our city is under attack. Our daily life is unrecognizable. We are bowed and we are worn down. We are grieving our dead. But we are not broken, nor will we ever be. So the real question, the real test, is how we will come back. Not just our initial response and recovery, but our commitment to each other and to long-term change. That spirit we have felt each night at home and across our neighborhoods and across this city, that is the spirit that must move our economic recovery and our commitment to heal an unjust world. There is no plan, no purchase, no wall that will forever protect Los Angeles from a threat like this. But we can forever promise ourselves that the next threat we face, we will face stronger and more equal, with the chasm between rich and poor closed and covered. We can promise ourselves that we will leave behind the old normal in favor of a new justice. Our city is hurting. How could it not be? But our city is ready. Our eyes are open wide to the high demands of justice, our arms outstretched, announcing to a neighbor we may not touch that we will not let you fall. Our hearts, Los Angeles, are stronger than ever, and we are the city of angels, and we will fly again. Thank you, Los Angeles, and good night.